Okay, so now you know how to save data to a comma-delimited text file, and in this video we're going to look at how to read data into the program from a comma-delimited text file. And basically all of the techniques that you see here you've seen before in some way or another, but this will be a little new in the way that we're bringing it all together. I do have a little bit of code in here. This is for the end when we're all done. We want to make sure that the parallel arrays have been populated with the data, and so I just threw a simple for loop in here to print out the contents. Maybe that'll shorten the length of the video a little bit if I don't have to code that. Now let me just show you the text file that has our data in it. It's the dwarfs.txt file, and we have the dwarf name with a comma and the pounds of coal that dwarf mined for the day. So this is really the file that we created in the last video, and it's worth noting again though that, alright, this is the program file that I'm going to code in this video. It's called readCommaDelim, and it's very important because this program is going to be using the dwarfs.txt file. We've got to make sure that dwarfs.txt is in the same folder location as my program file. Okay, so that's a very important step that you need to take when you're working with comma-delimited or any kind of text files, really. Okay, so you may recall a couple videos ago we were reading data from an input file. We were just working with a simple array then, but the same technique applies here. We can't use the for loop because we, in reality, probably won't know how many lines of text are in that input file. So we have to use a while loop that will assess whether or not there's still data coming in. And if there is data coming in, then we'll, splice it and dice it and all that stuff. So let's begin with a line number variable, and we'll set that to 1. And then remember in that video when we had to first, before we even thought about the while loop, we got one line of data into the program, the first word. So we'll say input line equals file.read line as before. Okay. File path is going to be our dwarfs.txt. I'll just hard code the name of the file there, and the line number, which we have in the previous line. So we'll say dwarfs.txt. I'm watching my spelling. Whoops. Watching my spelling. Not a good place to have a typo. And then the line number, which we're keeping track of by the line number variable. Okay. So once we have that one line of input into the program, we can think about the loop. So we'll say while input line is not equal to nothing, meaning as long as we have something, then we're going to execute the body of the loop. Let me end my loop so I don't forget. Okay, so when I have the one line of data in here, what do I want to do? We're dealing with Dopey first time through. I want to put the name Dopey into the dwarves array, and then I want to put his pounds of coal into the pounds of coal array. Alright, so we'll end up with parallel arrays. But this comes in as one line of input, so I have to cut that line and separate these values from one another. So what's our cutting point going to be? The comma, really. So we're going to have to find the comma. You know how to do that, the get index of, the text get index of method. And then once we find the position of the comma, we can isolate the dwarf name, and then we can also isolate the pounds of coal and put them into their array. So this program requires a little bit of maneuvering, but again, really nothing totally new to you. So why don't we say comma POS for the comma position, okay? And we're going to use the text get index of method. Okay, what text are we concerned with? The input line that's coming through into the program. And what are we looking for? We're looking for the comma. That's the subtext that we care about, this comma. Okay, so we have the comma position, and that's in the comma POS variable. Okay, so once we have that, we can isolate the dwarf name and put it into the dwarves array. So we'll create the dwarves array here, and now I have to provide an array index, right? We don't have a built-in loop counter, but we do have line number that works. Okay, first time through the loop, line number is 1. We're looking at that first element in the array. Eventually we're going to increment line number, so second time through the loop, line number will be 2, and we'll put the second dwarf into the second element of the array, and so on. So line number works well here. Okay, so to isolate the dwarf name, we'll use the text get subtext method. This guy requires 3 arguments. First, the text that we're interested in, that's the input line, right? The starting position, we're going to start in position number 1, meaning the first character, first letter, the first letter of the dwarf's name, basically. And then the number of characters to take. Well, all the dwarfs have different lengths of names, but we do know that we want to take up to, not including the position of the comma, which we just found in the previous line. So we want to provide the input line as the text argument. We're starting in position 1, we said. And then we want to take up to, not including the position of the comma, so that'll be comma POS minus 1. If I do just simply comma POS, that's going to leave a trailing comma on the dwarf's name, which we don't want. So comma POS minus 1. So that'll get the dwarf's name into the dwarf's array. And now we can put the pounds of coal into the pounds of coal array. So why don't we say LBS coal, once again line number, we're using as our array index, equals text dot, how about get subtext to end, get subtext to end. Alright, so what is the text that we're interested in, that we care about? It's the line input. And then where are we starting? We're starting right after the comma, so it'll be comma POS plus 1 as our starting position, and then it'll just take all the characters right up to the end, which is in fact the number of pounds of coal mined. So we'll say input line here, and then comma POS plus 1. Okay? So that'll populate the parallel arrays. However, we're not done with this loop. Very importantly, we've got to increment line number. So we'll say line number equals whatever's in there plus add 1 to it. That'll increment by 1 with each iteration or each repetition of the loop. And then also don't forget, we need to get the new line of input into the program. So we'll say input line, well, you know what, it's basically this line. I guess I'll copy it and paste it in. Okay, and you may remember that from the previous program where we read data from an input file. We had a line like this where you start by reading just the one line outside of the loop, but then inside of the loop you're also going to have that exact same line, so you're reading line by line as the loop executes. But you've got to start with something. You've got to start with something, so that's why you have that one outside of the loop as well. So that should do it. Let's go ahead and run it. If we see dwarves and coal at the console window or the text window, we know it worked, and it did. We know that our arrays are populated because we wrote that loop. I wrote it before the video began. That would print the dwarves and the coal separated by a tab there. So that's just something that we would have been doing just a couple weeks ago when we were processing arrays without files.